The automatic door of the residential block hissed shut behind them, sealing out the hum of the spaceport, but it could not seal out the bone-deep exhaustion clinging to Donald's shoulders. He adjusted the strap of his duffel bag, the heavy canvas biting into his collarbone, and looked down at his children. Mason and Tessa were vibrating with that specific frequency of energy that only 10-year-olds possessed after being confined in a transport shuttle for 6 weeks. They looked around the hallway of Block C, their eyes wide, taking in the bioluminescent strips running along the ceiling and the polished, almost liquid texture of the walls. "It smells like ozone and fake lemons," Tessa said, wrinkling her nose. She spun in a circle, her boots squeaking on the pristine floor. "Is this home now, Dad?" "It is a place to sleep," Donald corrected gently. "And right now it is a place to eat. Who is hungry?" "I could eat a starship," Mason declared, throwing his arms up. "A whole one, engines first." Donald smiled, a rare expression that crinkled the corners of his tired eyes. He ushered them toward their assigned unit number 402. The hallway was quiet, the air conditioned to a sterile chill. Pollara was a marvel of engineering, a floating city planet, held together by gravity generators and the mysterious chorus canopy. But to Donald, it was just another place where he had to keep them alive. He tapped his wrist link against the door panel. It chimed melodically, and the door slid open to reveal a living space that was clean white and completely devoid of character. "Bags down," Donald ordered softly. "Wash up. I will find food." As the twins scrambled toward the sanitation unit, shoving each other playfully, Donald collapsed onto the lone modular sofa. He brought up his wrist interface. The local network had recommended an application called Lumen Lunch. Apparently on Pollara, getting food delivered was a social experience. He installed it. The interface was flashy, projecting a hologram of spinning plates and smiling alien faces above his wrist. He entered his dietary requirements: 3 humans, high protein, no refined sugar for Mason, because he would never sleep, and cheap. The interface blinked. A notification pulse expanded in blue light. 99% match found. Donald blinked. That seemed high for a stranger just arriving on the planet. He tapped the icon. The user profile popped up. The avatar was not a plate of food or a smiling chef. It was a stylized, stern-looking feline creature wearing a high-collared military uniform with heavy epaulets. The username was simply Admiral C. Donald let out a dry huff of amusement. "Must be a mascot," he muttered. "Maybe they specialize in fish." On a whim, born of fatigue and the absurdity of the high match percentage, he typed a message. "Hi." He hit send. He expected a menu. He expected a coupon code. What he got was a sudden violent shift in the ambient lighting of the room, from soft white to a pulsing, aggressive crimson. 1 second passed. "Dad," Mason called from the bathroom. "Why is the light red?" 2 seconds passed. A high-pitched shriek tore through the air, coming not from the room, but from the corridor outside. It was a siren, but it sounded more like a mechanical scream. The door to their unit slammed shut and the mag locks engaged with a thunderous clank that vibrated through the floor. Donald was on his feet instantly. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. He did not run. He flowed. He moved to the bathroom door, grabbed both children by the shoulders, and pulled them into the main room, positioning them behind the heavy structural support of the kitchen island. "Stay low," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that made the twins freeze instantly. "Do not make a sound." Outside, the hallway erupted. He could hear the heavy thrum of rotors. Drones. Not delivery drones, security enforcement. Donald moved to the door control, locked. He looked through the translucent view panel. The hallway was swarming. Small, spherical drones with red eye sensors were zipping back and forth. Down the hall, he saw his neighbors, tall, slender beings with translucent skin and large, frightened eyes peering out of their doors. They looked at Donald's unit, then at the drones, and their faces twisted in pure horror. They were looking at his door like it was the source of a plague. "Dad, what did you do?" Tessa whispered, her hands gripping her knees. "I just said hi," Donald whispered back, bewildered. Then the floor dropped. It was not a metaphor. The gravity generators of Sector 7 did not just fail. They fluctuated. A deep, groaning sound like a whale dying in a cavern echoed through the building's superstructure. This was the Ravel tide. He had read about it in the briefing packet, a minor atmospheric and gravitational anomaly. The briefing packet had lied. The hallway outside tilted 45 degrees to the left. Through the view panel, Donald saw the chaos. The physics of the corridor inverted. A cleaning cart, heavy and metallic, became a projectile sliding rapidly down the inclined floor. The slender neighbors who had been standing in their doorways were thrown off balance. They did not tumble like humans. They stiffened their limbs, locking up in terror. On Polara, loss of control was the ultimate fear. One neighbor, a female holding a basket of crystalline fruits, lost her grip on the doorframe. She slid helplessly across the slick floor, straight toward the jagged edge of a broken wall panel where the drones had smashed a sensor array. Donald did not think. He did not weigh the legal consequences of breaking a maglock. He slammed his palm against the emergency release. It denied him. He stepped back and kicked the manual override lever with a force that shattered the casing. The door hissed confused and slid open halfway. "Stay," he commanded the twins. Donald launched himself into the hallway. The gravity was wrong here, heavier, pulling him sideways. To a Pelleran, this was a nightmare. To Donald, who had spent 10 years mining on a moon with variable gravity storms, it was Tuesday. He planted his boots, sliding slightly, and lowered his center of gravity. The neighbor was screaming, a high-pitched sound that grated on the ears. She was feet away from the jagged metal. Donald lunged. He did not grab her hand that would dislocate her shoulder with the momentum. He grabbed the back of her envirosuit harness. The impact jerked him forward, slamming his chest against the doorframe, but he held on. He gritted his teeth, his forearm muscles cording, as he hauled her back against the pull of the tilted floor. He swung her around, pinning her safely against the wall. "Breathe," he told her. She was hyperventilating, her 3 eyes, wide and black with shock. "Look at me. You are solid. You are safe." She stared at him, trembling. She looked at his thick arms, his heavy boots, the dense muscle of a high-gravity survivor. She did not look grateful. She looked like she was standing next to a predator. "Freeze." The command came from the other end of the corridor. Donald looked up. Hovering there, utilizing magnetic boots to stand perfectly upright, despite the 45-degree tilt, was a woman. She was striking, sharp features, pale violet skin, and eyes that glowed with a faint internal luminescence. She wore the high-collared uniform of the Pelleran fleet. The avatar from the app. Admiral Callista. She had a kinetic pistol, aimed directly at Donald's chest. Her finger was taut on the trigger. Behind her, a squad of enforcement officers had weapons trained on him. "Step away from the civilian death worlder," Callista ordered. Her voice was ice-clipped and precise. Donald slowly raised his hands, palms open. He did not step away, because if he did, the civilian would slide down the hall again. He kept his body interposed between the terrified woman and the drop. "She will fall if I let go," Donald said calmly. Callista blinked. The targeting reticle in her monocle was flashing red, identifying Donald as a Class 5 threat, a human, a species from a high-gravity death world, known for chaos and violence. The algorithm said he was dangerous. The algorithm said he was attacking the civilian. But her eyes saw his hand. He was not squeezing the civilian's neck. He was gripping her harness, anchoring her. The Ravel tide shuddered again. The floor lurched another 10 degrees. A heavy crate of rations dislodged from a drone came hurtling down the corridor from the ceiling, which was now acting as a wall. It was aiming straight for Donald's head. "Look out!" one of the officers shouted. Donald did not flinch. He did not duck. If he ducked, the crate would hit the woman behind him. He raised his left arm, catching the heavy crate on his forearm, with a sickening thud. He grunted a sharp exhalation of breath, and shoved the crate aside, letting it clatter harmlessly down the slope. He turned back to Callista, his expression mild, though his arm was throbbing. "If you are going to arrest me, Admiral, could you wait until gravity decides which way is down?" Callista lowered her weapon an inch. She had seen seasoned Marines break under a Revel tide. This man stood in it like he was waiting for a bus. Suddenly, a wheezing sound came from behind a pile of delivery boxes near the lift. I have the audit logs." A small, rotund creature, with fur like a damp otter, scrambled out from behind the boxes. He was wearing a bright yellow delivery vest that was 2 sizes too small. He was clutching a thermal container to his chest. "Benny," Callista asked, her brow furrowing, "what are you doing in a restricted zone?" Benny, the delivery courier, looked at the Admiral, then at the tilting floor, then at the human, holding up a wall and a woman. He gasped for air. "I delivered the soup. The app said priority customer. Then the doors locked. Then the floor tried to eat me." He looked at Donald. "You ordered the spicy bisque that comes with a mandatory security audit. Your service is very thorough." The absurdity of the moment hung in the air. The gravity stabilizers finally kicked in with a hum. The floor slowly groaned and leveled out. The neighbor woman collapsed to her knees, weeping softly. Donald knelt and checked her pulse, or what he assumed was a pulse point on her neck. It was racing, but steady. He stood up and dusted off his pants. Callista holstered her weapon, though her hand remained resting on the grip. She marched toward him, her boots clicking with military precision. Up close, she was intimidating, radiating an aura of absolute control. "Identify yourself," she demanded. "Donald," he said. "Just Donald." "You are human," she stated. It sounded like an accusation. "From Earth, or one of the colonies." "Colony Sigma 9, Donald answered. Callista's eyes narrowed. "A death world. 3 times standard gravity, atmospheric toxicity, constant seismic activity." She looked him up and down, noting the density of his frame, the scars on his hands. "You are built for war, Donald." Donald looked past her toward the door of his unit, where Mason and Tessa were peeking out their eyes, wide with fear. He stepped slightly to the side, blocking her view of them, shielding them from her scrutiny. "I am built to survive, Admiral," Donald said softly. "But my children, they are from grade 4. They like drawing and star mapping. They are not built for war." It was a gentle rebuke delivered with a hint of tired humor. Callista paused. She looked at the man. He was dangerous. Her tactical display screamed it, but his heart rate was resting. He had just caught a 50-kilogram crate with one arm to save a stranger who looked at him with disgust. Before she could respond, the building shuddered again. An aftershock. It was sharp and violent. A light fixture above the door of Unit 402 shattered. Shards of reinforced glass rained down. Donald moved before the sound of the breaking glass even registered. He spun around, diving toward the doorway. He did not try to catch the glass. He threw his body over Mason and Tessa, curling his spine, turning his broad back into a shield. The shards struck him, bouncing off his heavy jacket, a few slicing against his exposed neck. He did not flinch. He held the position, his hands cupping the children's heads, whispering something soothing that Callista could not hear. The hallway went silent. The dust settled. Callista watched him. She saw the way his body created a perfect perimeter of safety. She saw the absolute lack of hesitation. In her world on Polara, instincts were suppressed. Emotions were regulated because emotions caused mistakes, and mistakes in a floating city killed people. But this was not a mistake. Donald stood up slowly, checking the twins. "Anyone hurt?" "No, Dad," Tessa said, her voice trembling. "You're bleeding, Donald wiped a small cut on his cheek. It is fine. Just a scratch. He turned back to Callista. He looked weary. He held out his wrists expecting the magnetic cuffs. I assume I broke a protocol. Or several. Callista stared at him. The algorithm on her retinal display was flashing detain, isolate, expel. She reached up and tapped her comms unit. Stand down, squad leader. Secure the perimeter. Admiral, the squad leader's voice crackled in her ear. The target is a high-risk variable. The target, Callista, said, her eyes locked on Donald's calm face, is coming with me to the rhythm control station. For interrogation, Donald asked, lowering his hands. For assessment, Callista corrected. She signaled for 2 officers to escort the twins. Your children will be safe in the observation lounge. They have nutrient synthesizers there. Better than the soup. Benny, still clutching the thermal container, raised a hand. The soup is actually quite good. It has a 5-star rating. Bring the soup, Benny, Callista sighed. You are a witness. As they walked toward the transport lifts, the neighbors parted like water, pressing themselves against the walls to avoid touching Donald. He walked with a heavy, deliberate gait, his eyes scanning the structural seams of the ceiling. As they passed a fallen medical kit dropped by a fleeing drone, Donald stopped. The officers tensed, raising their rifles. Donald bent down. He picked up a portable respirator that had rolled under a bench. He dusted it off and placed it gently on the bench, right next to a Pelleran male, who was wheezing in the thin air of the aftermath. Yours, I think, Donald said to the terrified alien. He stood up and kept walking. Callista watched him. Why, she thought. Why help them? They fear you. They would vote to space you in a heartbeat. Donald's internal monologue was quieter. I came here to stop fighting, he thought, watching the back of Mason's head as the boy walked ahead with the guards. I came here so they would not have to learn how to patch a pressure suit in the dark. But if the ground won't stop moving, I can't stop catching things. They reached the rhythm control station 10 minutes later. It was the nerve center of the city, a circular room dominated by a massive translucent dome that looked out into the swirling, nebulous colors of the chorus canopy, the energy field that kept Polara alive. Technicians monitored thousands of holographic streams, tracking the vibrations of the city. The mood was tense. The Ravel tide was getting worse. Sit, Callista ordered, pointing to a diagnostic chair. Donald sat. He watched through a glass partition as Benny set up a picnic for Mason and Tessa in the lounge. At least they were eating. Connect him to the bioscan, Callista told Dr. Soren. Dr. Soren, a spindly, nervous man with cybernetic spectacles, hurried over. He attached sensors to Donald's temples and chest. This is highly irregular, Admiral. He is a death worlder. His biological rhythm is chaotic. It will disrupt the calibration. Do it, Callista said. The sensors hummed. A large holographic screen above Donald's head flickered to life. It showed a jagged, angry red line, his heartbeat, his adrenaline, his cortical activity. See, Dr. Soren grimaced. Too much noise, too much variance. He is a stress fracture waiting to happen. Donald closed his eyes. He thought of the mine collapse on Sigma-9. He thought of the silence after the screaming stopped. He thought of the first time he held Tessa, how small she was, and how he had terrified himself with the realization that he would burn down the universe to keep her warm. He breathed in. He breathed out. He did not try to slow his heart. He did not try to be calm. He simply accepted the chaos. He accepted the fear. He held it just like he held the crate. He anchored it. On the screen, the jagged red line did not flatten. Instead, it synchronized. It formed a perfect, powerful rhythmic wave. It pulsed with a strength that made the other lines on the monitor look like trembling threads. The room went silent. Dr. Soren adjusted his spectacles, his mouth falling open. Impossible. Callista stepped closer to the screen. The readouts were scrolling faster than she could read, but the central analysis was static, glowing in bright, undeniable white text. Anchor candidate, confirmed. Compatibility, 99%. Callista looked down at Donald. He was just sitting there, eyes closed, looking like a man taking a nap in a hurricane. She felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. The city of Pollara was built on rhythm, on the delicate harmony of the canopy. But the canopy was cracking. The song was breaking. They didn't need another delicate instrument. They needed a heavy weight. They needed something that could stand in a gravity storm and not move. "What is he?" Dr. Soren whispered. Callista watched the steady, powerful pulse on the screen. It looked like a heartbeat that could pump blood through a mountain. "He is the one who catches us," Callista said quietly. "Or he is the one who pulls us all down." She turned to Donald. "Open your eyes, Donald. We need to talk about your rent." The bioscan chamber smelled of antiseptic and cold electricity. It was a smell that Donald associated with quarantine zones and triage centers, places where people were processed rather than treated. He sat on the edge of the diagnostic bed, his shirt removed, while a buzzing halo of sensors rotated slowly around his torso. Dr. Soren stood behind a transparent partition, tapping furiously on a holographic interface. Every few seconds the doctor would pause, adjust his spectacles, and make a sound that was somewhere between a hum of fascination and a groan of despair. "His bone density is 3 times the galactic standard," Dr. Soren muttered, though the audio pickup in the room amplified his voice clearly. "His muscle fibers are wound like steel cables, and his adrenal response system is dormant. It is completely dormant." Admiral Callista stood by the door, her arms crossed. She had not taken her eyes off Donald since they arrived. "Dormant?" she asked. "Is he sick?" "No," Dr. Soren said, sliding a data pane to the side. "He is waiting. It is a predatory adaptation. Most species on Pollara react to stress with immediate flight or freeze responses. This subject only reacts when the threat is absolute. It is unsettling." Donald ignored them. He looked toward the corner of the room where Mason and Tessa were sitting on a floating bench. They looked small in the sterile white room. Tessa was rubbing her arms, shivering slightly in the climate-controlled air. "Dad," Mason whispered. "Are we in trouble?" "No," Donald said. His voice was calm, a low rumble that cut through the high-pitched hum of the machinery. "Just paperwork, Mace. Boring paperwork." He saw Tessa shiver again. Donald stood up. "Sit down," Callista ordered instantly, her hand twitching toward her belt. "The scan is not complete." "My daughter is cold," Donald said. He walked past the sensor ring. The machine beeped in protest, flashing red warning lights. Donald did not care. He walked over to the pile of his belongings on the side table, his heavy mining jacket, his boots, and his shirt. He grabbed the flannel shirt, the fabric worn soft from years of use on Sigma 9. He knelt in front of Tessa. "Arms up, Tess." She lifted her arms and he slid the oversized shirt over her head. It swallowed her small frame, the sleeves hanging down past her hands. She smiled, burying her nose in the collar. "Smells like dust," she said. "Smells like home," Donald corrected. As he rolled up the sleeves of the shirt so her hands could be free, his movement exposed his own left wrist. The heavy cuff of his trousers had hidden it before, and the biosensors had been focused on his torso. There, strapped to his thick wrist, was a watch. It was an analog device, ancient and battered. The casing was scratched titanium, and the face was cracked slightly at the edges. It did not glow with holographic light. It ticked. A physical mechanical tick that was almost audible in the quiet room. Callista froze. She took 2 steps forward, her boots striking the floor hard. "Stop!" Donald finished rolling Tessa's sleeve and looked up. "What now? Is checking the time illegal in this sector too?" Callista did not answer. She was staring at the buckle of the watch strap. It was worn silver, but the engraving was still visible. It was a stylized image of a tree with roots that wrapped around a shield. "Where did you get that?" Callista asked. Her voice had lost its command tone. It was breathless. Donald glanced at the watch. It was my wife's. She gave it to me before she died. Your wife, Callista, looked at him, searching his face. Was she Varen Pelleran? She was human, Donald said, frowning. Like me. She found it in a salvage yard on a trade route. She liked the ticking sound. Said it helped her sleep. Dr. Soren came around the partition, his eyes wide behind his lenses. He hurried over to Donald, ignoring the personal space boundaries that most Pellerans strictly observed. He peered at the watch. The sigil of the first canopy, Dr. Soren whispered. Admiral, look, the roots. That is not just a design. That is the original frequency key. I know what it is, Doctor, Callista said sharply. She looked at Donald with a new expression, suspicion mixed with a strange kind of awe. That watch bears the insignia of the Interspecies Rescue Vanguard. They were the ones who built the first anchors for the Chorus Canopy 500 years ago. They were not soldiers. They were people who ran into collapsing stars to save miners. Donald rubbed his thumb over the scratched glass face of the watch. She just liked the ticking, he repeated stubbornly. He did not want his grief complicated by their history. Can we finish this? The kids need to sleep. You do not understand, Dr. Soren said, his hands fluttering. The canopy is a sonic field. It requires a biological anchor to stabilize the vibrations. For decades, we have used crystals, machines, artificial intelligences. But they drift. They lack intent. The legends say the first anchors used devices like this to synchronize their heartbeats with the planet. Legends, Donald scoffed. He stood up, towering over the doctor. My heart beats because I eat protein and exercise. It does not sync with your planet. Before Dr. Soren could argue, the room was bathed in amber light. A low, pulsing siren began to wail. It was different from the security alarm earlier. This one was deeper, a sound that vibrated in the teeth. Sector 4, Callista said, snapping into operational mode instantly. She tapped her comms link. Report. Structural failure in the dormitory quadrant. A panicked voice crackled over the line. The Ravel tide hit a gas main. The maglocks are fused. We have civilians trapped in the lower levels. Atmosphere is toxic. Donald's head snapped up. Gas, methane ammonia mix, the voice confirmed. Highly volatile. Callista looked at Donald, then at the twins. Doctor, keep them here. Secure the room. She turned to leave. Wait, Donald said. Callista paused at the door. This is not your concern, Deathworlder. You are under assessment. Sector 4 is where you put the families with children, Donald said. It was not a question. He had seen the layout on the map when they arrived. Low income, high density. We have containment teams, Callista said, though she looked unsure. You have guys with guns and drones, Donald said. He walked over to his duffel bag and pulled out a heavy-duty multi-tool and a roll of industrial sealing tape. He shoved them into his pockets. I worked deep core mines for 10 years. I know what methane does in a confined space. It does not wait for your containment team. He looked at Mason. Watch your sister. Do not open the door for anyone but me or the Admiral. Mason nodded, his face pale but determined. Yes, sir. Donald looked at Callista. I am coming. I cannot authorize a civilian. Then arrest me when we get back, Donald interrupted. He walked past her, into the corridor. But right now, you need someone who can walk through a heavy atmosphere without fainting. Callista hesitated for a fraction of a second. She looked at the datapad in her hand, the 99% match. She looked at the broad back of the human walking away from safety. Come, she ordered, sprinting to catch up. The situation at Sector 4 was worse than the report indicated. The Ravel tide had twisted the corridor like a wet towel. The floor was buckled, creating steep ramps and jagged drops. Thick, yellow-green smoke churned in the air, limiting visibility to less than 2 meters. The sound of coughing and the hiss of escaping gas filled the narrow space. A squad of Pelleran enforcement officers stood at the perimeter, wearing sleek breathing masks. They were arguing with a group of terrified residents. "We cannot enter," the squad leader shouted. "The structural integrity is compromised at 30%. The vibrations of our boots could cause a total collapse." "My mate is in there!" a resident screamed, clawing at the officer's arm. Donald and Callista arrived at the barricade. Callista's presence silenced the officers, but the fear remained. "Status!" Callista barked. "Admiral," the squad leader stammered. "The gas pressure is rising. If we breach the door to the lower dorms, the pressure differential will blow the windows out. Everyone inside will be sucked into the void." Callista looked at the schematics on her wrist. "We need to equalize the pressure first. How long for the engineering drone?" 12 minutes, the squad leader said. Donald stood by the sealed blast door. He pressed his ear against the cold metal. He closed his eyes, tuning out the shouting, tuning out the siren. He listened. Beneath the hiss of the gas he heard it. A rhythmic thumping. Someone was banging on a pipe. And faint, very faint, the sound of crying. "You do not have 12 minutes, Donald said. He pulled his head back. "There are 20 people in there, maybe more. The crying is getting quieter. That means the oxygen is running out." "We follow protocol," the squad leader insisted, stepping in front of Donald. "We wait for the drone." Donald looked at the officer. 2 minutes, Donald said flatly. "In 2 minutes that crying stops. And then you are not waiting for a rescue. You are waiting for a cleanup." He turned to Callista. He did not beg. He simply looked at her with the same intensity he had shown in the bioscan room. "Open the manual override. I will go in. I can seal the leak from the inside." "It is suicide," Callista said. "You have no suit." Donald pulled his shirt collar up over his nose. "I have lungs the size of your fuel tanks. I can hold my breath for 4 minutes if I have to. Just open the door." Callista looked at the squad leader, then at Donald. She saw the logic of the bureaucracy, safe, slow, deadly. And she saw the logic of the human, risky, immediate, alive. "Open it," Callista ordered. "Admiral, I protest." "Open the damn door, Lieutenant," Callista roared, her voice echoing with a ferocity that made the squad leader flinch. The officer punched the code. The heavy doors groaned and slid open a crack. Green gas billowed out. Donald did not hesitate. He slid through the gap, disappearing into the smog. "Give me a mask," Callista demanded, grabbing a respirator from the supply crate. "I am going in as support." "Admiral." She ignored them and followed the human. Inside, the world was a nightmare of yellow haze and twisted metal. The gravity was shifting again, pulling to the right. Donald was moving low, crab-walking across the tilted floor. "Over here," he shouted, his voice muffled by his shirt. Callista caught up to him. They were in a communal living area. Bodies were slumped against the walls, conscious, but fading. The gas was pouring from a ruptured conduit near the ceiling. "I can't reach it." Callista choked her eyes, watering despite the mask. The ceiling was 4 meters high. Donald scanned the room. He saw a pile of debris, mattresses, furniture jammed against the far wall. "Get them to the floor!" Donald yelled, pointing at the civilians. "Heat rises, gas rises. Get them flat." Callista nodded. She moved among the victims, shaking them, dragging them down to the floorboards, where the air was marginally cleaner. Her uniform was stained with soot. Her pristine image ruined, but her efficiency was brutal. Donald ran to the wall. He did not have a ladder. He had physics. He grabbed a heavy metal table, flipped it onto its side, and dragged it under the leak. He jumped onto it. It wobbled, but he held his balance. It wasn't high enough. He looked around. A frantic Pelleran, male eyes wide with panic, was trying to climb out a window that led only to the open vacuum of the shaft. "Don't!" Donald roared. The man didn't hear him. Panic had overridden his brain. If he broke that window, the decompression would kill them all. Donald leaped from the table. He hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact, and tackled the man just as he raised a chair to smash the glass. They hit the floor. The Pelleran flailed, striking Donald in the face with a bony elbow. It cut Donald's lip blood, tasting metallic in his mouth. The man screamed a high-pitched sound of pure terror, clawing at Donald's eyes. "Let me go! Let me out!" Donald did not strike back. He did not punch the man into submission. He used a grapple hold he had learned, breaking up fights in the mess halls of Sigma 9. He pinned the man's wrists to the floor, using his own body weight to immobilize him without crushing him. "Look at me," Donald shouted, bringing his face inches from the aliens. "I am not hurting you. I am pulling you out. Do you hear me? I am pulling you out." The man stared up at him, shaking violently. He saw the blood on Donald's lip. He saw the sheer, unmoving solidity of the human. "Breathe," Donald commanded. "Slow. Like this." Donald exaggerated a breath, inhaling through his nose, exhaling through his mouth. The man mimicked him, his panic subsiding just enough to stop fighting. "Stay here," Donald said. He released the man and sprinted back to the leak. He didn't have time to stack furniture. He looked at the conduit. It was a jagged tear. He pulled the roll of industrial tape from his pocket. He grabbed a pillow from a nearby bunk, ripped the casing off to expose the dense foam inside. He jumped. It was a jump that defied the heavy gravity of his homeworld. He caught the pipe with one hand, his muscles straining, as he hung suspended 4 meters in the air. With his other hand, he jammed the foam into the tear. The hissing stopped. "Tape!" he yelled. Callista was there. She tossed him the roll. He caught it, wrapped the pipe tightly, layer after layer, sealing the foam in place. He dropped to the floor, landing with a heavy thud. The room was silent, except for the wheezing of the survivors. "Clear!" Donald gasped, wiping the blood from his lip. "Ventilation should handle the rest." Callista looked at him. He was covered in soot, bleeding and sweating. He looked terrifying. And yet the survivors were crawling toward him, not away from him. They sensed what she had sensed in the bioscan. He was the safest thing in the room. Suddenly, a small voice piped up from the doorway. "Dad!" Donald spun around. Mason and Tessa were standing there just outside the gas line. They must have followed the squad. They had seen him tackle the man. They had seen the blood. Donald's heart hammered against his ribs, fear sharper than any he had felt during the rescue. "What am I teaching them?" he thought, his stomach twisting. "I promised them peace. I promised them a home where the walls don't shake. And here I am, covered in blood, fighting in a toxic cloud." He took a step toward them, afraid they would recoil. But then a wheezing, cheerful voice broke the tension. "All right, folks, who ordered the hydration package?" Benny came waddling around the corner, dragging a massive crate of bottled water. He was wearing 3 face masks stacked on top of each other, making him look like a furry duck. He stopped next to Mason, and Tessa looked at the carnage, looked at Donald, and his knees knocked together audibly. "Okay," Benny squeaked. "I am terrified, but hydration is important." He cracked open a bottle and held it out to the nearest survivor with a shaking hand. "Raise your hand if you are breathing so I don't shake." The survivor took the water. Then another. Mason ran forward, not to Donald, but to the man Donald had pinned down. He offered the man a clean cloth from his pocket. "For your head," Mason said quietly. "My dad didn't mean to squash you. He is just heavy." The man took the cloth, looking at the small human boy. "He saved me," the alien whispered. Donald let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. The extraction took another hour. By the time the last survivor was moved to the medical bay, the hallway was filled with repair drones. Donald sat on a crate near the exit, letting a medic droid scan his lip. Callista stood a few feet away watching him. She had debriefed the squad leader, reprimanded the officers for their hesitation, and reorganized the perimeter. But her mind was on the human. Warden Thane arrived with the silence of a shark entering water. He was tall, thin, and impeccably dressed in the silver robes of the administration. His face was smooth, unlined, and utterly devoid of warmth. He surveyed the scene, his eyes lingering on the broken window lock, the improvised pipe patch, and finally on Donald. "Admiral," Thane said. His voice was like dry leaves sliding over stone. "A chaotic morning." "We saved 22 lives, Warden," Callista said, stepping between Thane and Donald. "And caused significant structural stress," Thane noted, tapping his datapad. "And I see the irregular element was involved." He gestured a long, pale finger toward Donald. "The human brings noise, Admiral. Violence. I saw the footage of the altercation. He attacked a resident." "He restrained a suicidal panic response," Callista said, her voice hard. "Semantics," Thane smiled thinly. "The presence of a Deathworlder disrupts the social harmony. The residents are on edge. I suggest we move him to the isolation habitat on the outer rim. It is humane, quiet, far away from delicate systems that he might break." Donald stood up. He felt the familiar weight of judgment. It was the same look the corporate bosses gave miners when they were too old to dig, but too young to die. Disposable. He expected Callista to agree. It was the logical move. Callista looked at Thane. Then she looked at Donald. She saw the blood on his shirt, the way he stood protectively near his children, the way his hand rested on the old watch. "No," Callista said. Thane's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me." "He is not going to isolation," Callista said. "He is under my supervision. The rhythm control protocols allow me to designate essential personnel during a crisis." "Essential?" Thane laughed softly. "He is a brute, Callista. A relic of a violent evolution." "He held the line when your protocols failed," Callista said. "We do not need more silence, Warden. We need better anchors." Thane stared at her for a long moment, his smile fading into a look of cold calculation. "As you wish, Admiral. But when he breaks something that cannot be fixed, the fault will be yours." Thane turned and glided away, his robes rustling. Donald walked over to Callista. He looked tired. "You did not have to do that. The rim sounds quiet." "The rim is a graveyard with windows," Callista said. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out the watch. She had picked it up when the medic droid removed it to bandage Donald's wrist. She held it out to him. "Your wife," Callista said softly. She had good taste. Donald took the watch. He strapped it back on. The ticking sound resumed steady and rhythmic against his pulse. "Dr. Soren was right about one thing," Callista continued, her voice lowering so only he could hear. "The canopy is looking for a signal. It has been drifting for a century, Donald. It is scared. Like the people in that room were scared." She looked him in the eye. For the first time, she did not look at him like a soldier or a cop. She looked at him like a partner. "You are not just a new resident," she said. "You are the rhythm the canopy is calling. And I think perhaps you are the only one who can answer it." Donald looked at the watch, then at his children, who were helping Benny stack empty water bottles. "I just wanted dinner," Donald said, a faint smile touching his bruised lip. "I know," Callista said. "But on Polara, dinner comes with a price. Welcome to the team, Donald." Above them, through the skylight, the chorus canopy shimmered a vast aurora-like web of light. For a brief second, the colors shifted from a frantic violet to a calm, steady gold pulsing in perfect time with the ticking of the watch on Donald's wrist. The floating market of Sector 9 was a marvel of Pelleran engineering, and to Donald's practical eyes, a safety inspector's nightmare. It was a suspended bazaar, a labyrinth of interconnected platforms and gravity-tethered kiosks hovering over a drop that stretched down for 3 miles into the industrial smog of the lower atmosphere. The air smelled of roasted starnuts ozone and the faint, sweet perfume of the damp moss that grew on the undersides of the floating platforms. "Do not let go of my hand," Donald said, his grip firm on Tessa's small fingers. He looked at Mason, who was walking beside Benny. "And you keep an eye on Benny. He looks like he is going to wander off into a spice vat." Benny, who was currently mesmerized by a stall selling glowing gelatinous noodles, blinked. "I am merely conducting a culinary survey, Donald. It is for science. And my stomach." Mason grinned. "I got him, Dad. He won't get lost." Admiral Callista walked a few paces ahead of them. She was not in full dress uniform today, having opted for a tactical field suit, but the crowd still parted for her. She moved with a stiff, predatory grace, her eyes scanning every face, every drone, every shadow. She was still treating this like a prisoner transfer rather than a shopping trip for supplies. "We have 20 minutes, Callista announced, checking her wrist display. "The structural stabilizers are undergoing a cycle reset. We need to be off the suspension bridges before—" She stopped. The hum of the market, the chatter of thousands of beings, the whir of delivery drones, the sizzle of cooking food suddenly dropped in pitch. It went from a major key to a dissonant minor. The air pressure spiked. Donald's ears popped. "Dr. Soren," Callista said into her comms, her voice tight. "Readout. It is the Revel-Tide Admiral." Dr. Soren's voice crackled in her ear, high and frantic. "A surge, a big one. It is bypassing the dampeners in Sector 9. Donald looked down. The coffee in the cup of a passerby was not rippling. It was vibrating into a perfect geometric cone. "Run," Donald said. He did not shout. He scooped Tessa up into his left arm and grabbed Mason's collar with his right hand. "Benny, move." The world tilted. It was not a gradual slide. It was a violent, sickening lurch. The entire southern quadrant of the floating market dropped 40 feet in a single second before the emergency tethers snapped taut. The sound was deafening. The screech of tearing metal, the shatter of 1,000 glass display cases, and then the screams. Gravity twisted. Down became sideways. Donald slammed into a support pillar, taking the impact on his shoulder to shield Tessa. He saw a stall, selling heavy ceramic pottery, slide past them, smashing into a group of tourists who were too frozen by shock to move. "Dad!" Mason yelled, his feet scrabbling for purchase on the slick, tilted floor. "I have you!" Donald grunted, hauling Mason close. He looked around. Chaos. Absolute chaos. The panic was more dangerous than the gravity. People were shoving, climbing over each other, trampling the fallen, to reach the magnetic tram stations, which were now swaying wildly in the air. "Admiral!" Donald shouted over the noise. "They are crushing each other!" Callista was clinging to a railing 10 feet away. She had pulled a stun baton and was trying to establish a perimeter. "Citizens of Polara, hold your positions. Evacuate in an orderly fashion." Her voice was command-grade, amplified by her suit's speakers. It was authoritative, it was powerful, and nobody was listening. Panic had stripped away their civilization. They were animals in a trap. Then the situation got worse. High above them, the swarm of black beetle-like maintenance drones, usually harmless machines that scrubbed graffiti and welded loose panels, suddenly turned red. Their status lights shifted from the calm blue of service to the angry crimson of obstacle clearance. "Dr. Soren," Callista yelled. "What are the drones doing?" "The vibration," Soren screamed over the comms. "It has scrambled their IFF sensors. They think the debris is the people. They are trying to clear the clog." A drone swooped down toward a knot of people struggling at a bottleneck near the exit. A beam of high-intensity laser light shot from its underbelly. It wasn't a weapon. It was an industrial cutting tool designed to slice through steel beams. It sliced through a metal signpost inches from a Pellaran woman's head. She shrieked, falling back, causing a domino effect that sent 3 others tumbling toward the edge. "They are cutting a path," Donald realized, his stomach dropping. "They are trying to unclog the exit by removing the people." He looked at Callista. She was staring at the drone, horror dawning on her face. She raised her pistol to fire, but there were too many civilians in the line of fire. "We need a system," Donald roared. He looked at the layout of the tilted market. The wide central avenue was blocked by the drone. The side alleys were jammed. "Callista," Donald yelled, using her name without rank for the first time. "The maintenance tunnels. The service ramp behind the noodle stall. It is narrow, but it leads to the lower deck." "It is restricted access," Callista shouted back automatically. "Open it," Donald barked. "And get on the high ground. You direct the flow. I will clear the blockage." Callista looked at him. She saw the calculation in his eyes. He wasn't asking for permission. He was giving her a tactical plan. "Go," she ordered. Donald turned to his kids. He shoved them toward a heavy structural alcove, where Benny was cowering behind a crate of vegetables. "Benny," Donald said, grabbing the courier's vest. "This is your kitchen now. You see those people panicking? They are hungry customers. You need to calm them down. Give them water. Make them sit." I, Benny stammered. "Mason Tessa," Donald said, his voice dropping to that terrifyingly calm register. "Help Benny. Count breaths. 1, 2, 3. If they are screaming, they are breathing. If they are silent, check them. Do not move from this spot until I come back." "Where are you going?" Tessa cried, grabbing his sleeve. "To traffic control," Donald said. He turned and sprinted not away from the drones, but toward them. The market floor was slick with spilled oil and crushed fruit. Donald skated more than ran, using the momentum of the tilt. He grabbed a sheet of corrugated metal from a wrecked stall, a heat shield for a cooker, and held it up like a riot shield. A drone swooped, its laser whining. The beam hit the metal sheet. Hiss. The metal glowed white-hot instantly. Donald felt the heat sear the hair off his knuckles. The smell of burning fabric filled his nose as his sleeve caught a spark. He didn't drop the shield. He angled it. The laser deflected, slicing harmlessly into a pile of crates instead of the crowd of terrified shoppers. "Move!" Donald bellowed at the frozen group. "To the left. Follow the blue line on the floor. Don't run, slide." He didn't sound like a soldier. He sounded like a foreman. He sounded like a father. "Don't look at the laser," he shouted at a young Pelleran male who was paralyzed by the sight of the burning metal. "Look at my boots. Follow my boots." The young man blinked, latched onto the command, and scrambled toward the service ramp. Above them, Callista had climbed atop an overturned transport pod. She saw what Donald was doing. He was the dam holding back the chaos. She activated her amplifier again. This time, she didn't use the sterile language of protocol. "Eyes on the human," she shouted. "Follow the path he is making. If you push, you die. If you walk, you live. Move." Donald held the line. Another drone swooped. Another laser hit his makeshift shield. The metal was melting now, dripping molten slag onto his boots. He gritted his teeth, the pain a sharp white noise in the back of his mind. "Don't look at the burn," he told himself. "Look at the path." He saw a gap in the crowd. A family was stuck, pinned by a fallen beam. The drone was pivoting toward them, its sensors reading the beam as rubble to be disintegrated. Donald dropped the melting shield. He lunged. He didn't try to lift the beam, it weighed half a ton. He shoulder-checked the drone. It was a maneuver that should have broken his clavicle. He hit the hovering machine with the force of a runaway minecart. The drone spun wildly, its gyroscope confused by the kinetic impact. It crashed into a wall, its laser slicing a neat line through a neon sign. "Go!" Donald yelled at the family. "Service ramp now!" "Rook," Callista's voice screamed over the channel. "Shut them down. Kill the grid." "I can't." Rook, the team's tech specialist who was monitoring from the ship, sounded frantic. "The encryption is cycling too fast. The Revel tide is rewriting the code as I type." Donald heard this. He looked up. The drones were regrouping. There were 10 of them now, forming a phalanx. They were going to sweep the entire promenade. "Rook," Donald said, tapping his comms, his voice steady, despite the heavy heaving of his chest. "Where is the physical breaker?" "The hard line. Junction box Alpha 9, Rook said. "But it is on the support pillar. It is 30 feet up. You need a lift." Donald looked at the pillar. It was a lattice of steel struts, vibrating violently from the quake. "I don't need a lift," Donald muttered. "I need a knife." He reached into his boot and pulled out his multi-tool. He flicked the serrated blade open. He ran. He jumped, catching the lowest strut of the pillar. His muscles groaned. The gravity was fluctuating, making him feel like he weighed 400 pounds, 1 second, and 50 pounds the next. He climbed, hand over hand. No safety line. Below him, the market was a swirling mosaic of color and terror. He saw Benny huddled in the alcove, passing out water bottles with shaking hands. He saw Mason, holding a weeping alien child, showing him how to breathe. He saw Tessa, pointing people toward the ramp. "They are doing it," Donald thought, a fierce pride burning in his chest, hotter than the laser burn on his arm. "They are holding." He reached the junction box. It was sparked and smoking. "Donald, wait!" Callista yelled. "That is a live conduit. If you cut it." "If I don't, they get sliced," Donald said. He jammed the knife into the thick bundle of cables, marked with yellow hazard tape. Crack. A bolt of blue electricity arc thick as his thumb shot up his arm. Donald screamed. It wasn't a hero's shout. It was a raw animal sound of pain. His vision went white. His teeth slammed together so hard he thought they cracked. But he didn't let go. He twisted the blade. The cable severed. Instantly, the hum of the drones died. The red lights faded. 10 heavy metal beetles dropped from the air, crashing harmlessly onto the deck. The silence that followed was heavy. Donald slumped against the pillar, his left arm numb, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked down. The crowd had stopped screaming. They were moving, flowing. The panic had broken because the threat had fallen. "Clear!" Donald wheezed into the comms. "Drones are down!" But Pollara wasn't done with them yet. A deep, groaning sound echoed from the depths of the structure. The Revel tide had passed, but the stress fractures remained. The main suspension cable holding the eastern platform, where 20 people were still waiting to evacuate, snapped. It sounded like a gunshot. The platform swung down like a trapdoor. People slid. They clawed at the floor at each other. Most managed to grab the safety netting, but one group, a mother and 2 children, slipped past the net. They didn't fall into the abyss. They caught the edge of a dangling power line. They hung there, swaying over the 3-mile drop, their grips failing. "No!" Callista screamed. She was too far away. Donald was already moving. He slid down the pillar, hitting the deck with a roll. He scrambled to the edge of the broken platform. The power line was fraying. The mother looked up at him, her eyes wide black pools of resignation. She was slipping. Donald looked around. There was nothing to tie a rope to. The bollards had sheared off. He looked at the lamppost next to him. It was bent, but rooted deep in the substructure. He grabbed a coil of emergency cable from a wall box. He looped it around his waist. He didn't tie it to the post. There was no time to tie knots. He wrapped his legs around the lamppost, locking his ankles. He wrapped his left arm, the numb one, around the metal pole. He threw the other end of the cable down. "Grab it!" he roared. The mother reached out. She missed. "Swing!" Donald shouted. "Kick off the wall!" She kicked. She swung. She grabbed the cable. The weight hit Donald like a wrecking ball. 3 people. 400 pounds of dead weight amplified by the gravity swing. Donald felt his spine compress. The cable dug into his waist, bruising the kidney. His legs screamed as they crushed against the lamppost. He groaned, a low, guttural sound. He began to pull. One-handed. He hauled them up inch by agonizing inch. His right arm, the good one, bulged, the veins standing out like ropes. "I can't reach!" Callista was there. She had sprinted across the gap. She threw herself onto the deck beside him. She grabbed the cable below his hand. "Pull!" Donald gritted out. Callista pulled. Her hands were smaller, her muscles designed for agility, not this brute force torque. But she pulled with everything she had. She felt the vibration of the wire, the terrifying reality of the lives hanging on the end of it. Her hands started to shake. It wasn't weakness. It was the adrenaline crash. "I have them," Donald grunted. "Steady." They hauled the mother over the edge, then the children. As soon as their feet touched the deck, the mother collapsed, sobbing. Donald uncoiled the wire from his waist. He leaned back against the lamppost, his chest heaving like a bellows. He looked at his hand. It was trembling uncontrollably. He closed his fist, forcing it to be still. Callista sat next to him, her immaculate uniform torn at the knees, her face streaked with grease. She looked at Donald. She saw the burn on his arm, the blood on his lip, the sheer exhaustion etched into his face. And she saw the calm. "Are you not afraid?" she asked. Her voice was small, stripped of her rank. "You jumped onto a live pillar. You held 3 people over a void. Do you not have fear?" Donald looked at her. He took a slow breath, wincing as his ribs expanded. "I am terrified," he said. The honesty in his voice surprised her. "My knees are shaking so bad I don't think I can stand up." "Then how?" Callista asked. "How do you move?" Donald looked over at the alcove. Mason was giving a high five to a little Pelleran girl. Tessa was helping Benny stack crates. They were safe. They were helping. "I just act before the fear gets big," Donald said softly. "Fear is a weed, Callista. You have to yank it out while it is small. If you wait to think about it, it grows into a tree and then you can't move." Callista looked at his hands, scarred burns shaking. She looked at her own hands. They were steadying now. "A weed," she repeated. She looked at the survivors huddled together alive because of this philosophy. Her comms unit beeped. It was Warden Thane. "Admiral Callista." Thane's voice was smooth, detached. "Sensors indicate instability in Sector 9. I am initiating a containment protocol. We are sealing the bulkheads to the market." Callista froze. "Warden, we have civilians still inside. We have the evacuation team." "Calculated losses," Thane said. "If the instability spreads to the core canopy, the city falls. Seal the bulkheads." "That is an order." Donald looked at Callista. He heard the voice. He knew that tone. It was the tone of a shift manager explaining why it was cheaper to bury miners than to dig them out. He didn't say a word. He just watched her. Callista stood up. She walked to the edge of the platform where the blast doors were beginning to hiss, preparing to close. She keyed her comms. "Belay that order," she said. "Admiral." Thane's voice lost its smoothness. "You are violating a direct directive from the Warden." "I am on the ground," Callista said, her voice cold and hard as diamond. "I am the ranking officer in the theater. And I am telling you, Warden, if you seal these doors, you will have to seal them over my dead body." She turned to her squad, who were looking at her uncertainly. "Jam the doors," Callista shouted. "Use the cargo loaders. Nothing closes until every heart that is beating is on the other side." The squad hesitated for 1 second. Then they looked at Donald, who was standing up, favoring his burned arm. They looked at the mother clutching her children. They moved. They jammed the loaders into the door tracks. The gears ground to a halt. The exit stayed open. It took another hour to clear the market. By the time they reached the triage center on the upper level, the team was exhausted. They sat in a circle on the floor of the waiting area. It was a strange tableau. Donald sat in the center, drinking a nutrient pouch. Callista sat next to him, applying a biogel patch to his burn. Rook, a young Veyron with cybernetic implants in his fingers, was pacing nervously, muttering about how much trouble they were in. Dr. Soren was checking Mason and Tessa's vitals. Benny was sitting on a crate looking traumatized, but strangely proud, holding a thank you note a child had drawn for him. "We are going to be court-martialed," Rook mumbled. "Thane is going to recycle us into toaster parts." "Let him try," Callista said. She finished bandaging Donald's arm. She didn't pull away immediately. Her hand lingered on his forearm. "We saved 112 people today." "And we acquired a team," Benny piped up. "Did you see me? I dispensed hydration with 90% efficiency." "You did good, Benny," Donald said, smiling. You too, kids. You kept the rhythm. We just did what you said, Dad, Mason said, leaning his head on Donald's knee. Breathe. 1, 2, 3. Dr. Soren walked over to the window. He was looking up at the sky. The Ravel tide had stopped. The shaking had ceased. But something was wrong. Admiral, Dr. Soren said. His voice was hollow. They all stood up and went to the window. The chorus canopy, usually a seamless veil of aurora light protecting the city from the void, was different. Running right down the center of the southern hemisphere, there was a dark, jagged line. It looked like a scar on a beautiful face. It was a crack, a physical fracture in the energy field. The vibration was not just a quake, Dr. Soren whispered. It was a stress test, and we failed. He turned to face them. His eyes were terrified behind his spectacles. Thane was right to be scared, Dr. Soren said. The final wave is coming, and next time Polara will not just shake. He pointed a trembling finger at the floor. Next time, Polara will fall. Donald looked at the crack in the sky. He felt the watch ticking on his wrist. He felt Callista standing shoulder to shoulder with him. He felt his children holding his hands. He didn't feel the fear growing into a tree. He felt it, yes, but he reached down and pulled it out. Then we better be ready to catch it, Donald said. The service elevator shuddered as it descended into the bowels of Polara, rattling like a tin can full of bolts. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of ozone and damp earth, a scent that reminded Donald of the deep mines on Sigma-9, but sweeter, more artificial. We are entering the spinal column of the canopy, Dr. Soren announced, his voice tight. He was clutching a portable harmonic stabilizer to his chest, as if it were a life preserver. The vibrations down here are raw, unfiltered. If you hear voices, do not answer them. Voices, Benny squeaked, adjusting his delivery vest, which he was now wearing over a tactical flak jacket Callista had found for him. I thought this was a plumbing issue. You said we were fixing a leak. A leak in reality, Benny, Rook muttered from the corner, his fingers dancing over a holographic keypad. The Ravel tide is shaking the memory banks loose. The canopy stores the emotional residue of the city to balance the harmonic load. When it cracks, the ghosts get out. Donald stood in the center of the elevator, checking the seals on his oxygen mask. He looked at Mason and Tessa. They were holding hands, their eyes closed, breathing in a slow, rhythmic count. 1, 2, 3. Good, Donald said softly. Keep the rhythm. If you hear something that isn't us, squeeze the hand. Verify the touch. Real things have temperature. Callista watched him. She was leaning against the wall, her face pale under the harsh emergency lighting. The bruise on her cheek from the market battle was turning a dark purple. She looked less like an admiral, and more like a survivor. You have done this before, she said. It wasn't a question. Psych drift, Donald answered. Happens in deep core mining when the oxygen mix gets wrong and the pressure squeezes your brain. You start hearing your mom calling you for dinner. You start seeing the sun on a day when it is raining. He tightened a strap on his boot. The trick is to remember that the past is heavy. The present is light. If it feels heavy, it isn't real. The elevator slammed to a halt. The doors groaned open. They were not in a hallway. They were in a vein. The tunnel was organic, pulsing with a bioluminescent blue light that throbbed in time with a deep, subsonic heartbeat. The walls were made of a translucent crystalline material that seemed to sweat. The fracture point is 2 kilometers north, Callista said, checking her wrist display. We have 40 minutes before the next wave hits. If we don't seal the harmonic rift by then, the structural integrity fails, and the city above us drops. They moved out. The team had grown. It wasn't just Donald and the family anymore. It was a unit. Donald took point, his broad frame blocking the unknown. Callista covered the rear. Rook and Soren were in the middle with the tech. Benny and the twins were the heart carrying the supplies. The tunnel felt alive. It vibrated under their boots. Suddenly, Mason stopped. He looked at a blank section of the crystal wall. "Mom," he whispered. Donald froze. He turned around instantly. Mason's eyes were unfocused, staring at nothing. "She is singing," Mason said, a smile breaking across his face. "Dad, listen. She is singing the rain song." Donald stepped forward. He didn't yell. He didn't shake the boy. He reached out and took Mason's hand. He squeezed it hard, not enough to hurt, but enough to ground. "Mason," Donald said, his voice low and gravelly. "Feel my hand. Is it warm?" Mason blinked. "Yes." "Is the wall warm?" Mason hesitated. "No." "Then the wall is a lie," Donald said. "Mom is gone, Mace. This is just the echo. Don't chase the echo. Walk with me." Mason shuddered, a tear slipping down his cheek. The smile vanished, replaced by the grim reality of the tunnel. He squeezed Donald's hand back. "Okay, I'm back." Callista watched this interaction, her chest tightening. She had been trained to treat memory leaks with sedation, suppress the glitch. Donald treated it with truth. Acknowledge the pain, then keep walking. "Target ahead," Rook called out. "I am picking up heat signatures. Biological." They turned a bend in the tunnel and stopped. A massive blast door blocked the path. It was sealed shut, the red lights of a lockdown glowing angrily above it. Behind, the thick glass viewport faces were pressed against the pane. "It is the maintenance crew," Dr. Soren gasped. "They were down here when the lockdown started. They are trapped." Donald walked to the door. He pressed his hand against the glass. A Pelleran worker on the other side placed his three-fingered hand against Donald's. The worker was screaming, but the sound was muffled. He pointed to his throat. "The air scrubber is down," Donald said. "They are suffocating, and the heat," he touched the metal frame. "It is cooking them." "We have to keep moving," Dr. Soren said, his voice trembling. Donald looked at the time. 30 minutes. If we stop to open this door, it requires a manual bypass of the hydraulic locks. We will lose 10, maybe 15 minutes. We won't make it to the rift in time. Callista stepped forward. She looked at the crew inside. There were 12 of them. Their eyes were bulging, their movements sluggish. "The mission is the rift," Callista said. It was the Admiral speaking, the one who weighed the many against the few. "If the city falls, millions die. These 12. She trailed off. She looked at Donald. Donald didn't look at her. He was already pulling the multi-tool from his belt. He was examining the hinges of the door. "We are opening it," Donald said. "Donald," Callista said, stepping closer. "Think about the math. Millions versus 12. Donald turned to her. His eyes were hard, flinty. "I am not a mathematician, Callista. I am a neighbor. And on my block, if you hear knocking, you open the door." He jammed the tool into the control panel. "Rook, I need you to cycle the locking mechanism. Benny, get the water ready. They will be dehydrated." "But the time," Rook started. "Make time," Donald roared. It was the first time he had raised his voice in anger. "We do not walk past people who are breathing to save people who might die later. That is how you lose your soul before you lose the city." Rook looked at Callista. Callista looked at the trapped workers. She saw a father holding a picture of his family against the glass. She let out a sharp breath. "Rook, crack the code. Donald on the lever. Dr. Soren, prep triage." "Admiral, this is against protocol," Soren wailed. "I am rewriting the protocol," Callista snapped. "Move." They worked. It was brutal, sweaty work. The door mechanism was jammed by the shifting gravity. Donald and Callista had to physically crank the manual override wheel. "Heave," Donald grunted, his biceps straining. Callista pushed beside him. She felt the heat radiating from the door. She felt the sheer stubborn refusal of the human beside her to accept the logical choice. The door groaned. It hissed. Then, with a metallic screech, it slid open. The heat blasted out like a furnace. The workers tumbled out, coughing, gasping for the cooler air of the tunnel. Benny was there instantly, handing out water pouches. "Sip small sips, do not gulp or you will vomit." Donald grabbed the nearest worker, dragging him clear of the doorway. "Check the others. Make sure everyone is out." "Thank you," the worker wheezed, clutching Donald's arm. We thought the Admiral left us." Donald looked at Callista. She was kneeling beside a fallen worker, checking his pulse. She looked up and met Donald's gaze. There was no triumph in her eyes, just a raw, terrifying understanding. She had just broken the most fundamental rule of her command mission first, and she didn't regret it. "Sector warning," the automated voice of the system boomed through the tunnel. "Containment breach detected. Initiating quarantine protocol Omega. Isolating sector in 5 minutes." "Thane!" Callista hissed. "He sees we open the door. He thinks the memory leak is spreading. He is closing the blast shutters." "The shutters?" Donald asked. "Great big teeth," Rook said, pointing down the tunnel. "Giant metal slabs that come down from the ceiling every 50 meters. If they close, we are trapped in here with the ghosts." "Run," Donald said. "Now, everyone. If you can walk, run. If you can't, get carried." He scooped up the smallest of the rescued workers, a young apprentice with a broken leg, and threw him over his shoulder. "Go, go, go." The tunnel became a gauntlet. The ground shook violently as the massive shutters began to descend. Boom! The first one slammed shut 50 meters behind them. Boom! The next one closer. They sprinted. The air was thick with dust. The ghosts were getting louder, whispers of lost loves, cries of old wars echoing off the crystals. "Don't listen," Tessa shouted, running beside Mason. "It is just noise, like the washing machine." They reached a narrow section. A shard of crystal, dislodged by the vibration, fell from the ceiling. It was aimed straight at Rook. "Rook!" Callista screamed. She didn't think. She shoved the technician aside. The crystal shard didn't hit Rook. It grazed Callista's side, slicing through her tactical suit and into the flesh of her waist. She cried out, stumbling. Donald was there. He didn't stop running. He shifted the weight of the worker on his shoulder, reached out with his free arm, and grabbed Callista by the harness of her suit. "I got you," he growled. "Leave me," Callista gasped, clutching her side. "I am slowing you down." "Shut up," Donald said. "We are a set now. No partial deliveries." They dove under the final shutter, just as it slammed down, the wind of its impact ruffling their hair. They were in the clear. The central resonance chamber lay ahead. They collapsed on the floor chests, heaving. Donald gently set the worker down. He turned immediately to Callista. "Let me see," he said, his voice tight. He peeled back the torn fabric of her suit. The cut was deep, bleeding sluggishly. "Benny medkit!" Benny scrambled over his hands, shaking, but he produced the antiseptic foam and bandages. Donald worked quickly. His hands, usually so large and clumsy-looking, were incredibly precise. He cleaned the wound, applied the seal, and wrapped it tight. "It will hold," Donald said. He looked at her face. She was gray with pain. "I need you to stand Callista," he said softly. "I need you to be the Admiral for 10 more minutes. Can you do that?" Callista looked at him. She saw the worry lines etched deep around his eyes. She saw the way he shielded his children, the way he carried the worker, the way he bandaged her. "I am trying," she whispered. "Don't try," Donald said. He took her hand and placed it on his chest right over his heart. It was beating slow, strong like a war drum. "Borrow some of this. I have plenty." She felt the thud, thud, thud of his heart. It was the most grounding thing she had ever felt. It wasn't the frantic buzz of Polara. It was the steady rhythm of Earth. "Okay," she said. She took a breath. She stood up. She swayed, but she stood. "Let's fix this damn planet," she said. They entered the chamber. It was a vast, spherical room, located in the exact center of the city. In the middle floated the harmonic core, a massive spinning gyroscope of light and sound. But it was wobbling. A dark fissure ran through the light. The sound it emitted was a screeching wail. "The anchor point!" Dr. Soren yelled, running to the console. "The manual interface is open. We need to bridge the connection." "How?" Donald asked. "The frequency key," Soren pointed to the slot in the center of the console. "We need the signature of the first canopy." Donald looked at his wrist, the old watch. He walked to the console. The slot was a simple mechanical depression. It wasn't digital. It was designed for a physical object. He unbuckled the watch. "This was my mother's," Donald said, mostly to himself. "She never told me what it was. She just said it kept time." "It keeps the time," Soren said reverently. Donald placed the watch into the slot. It clicked. For a second, nothing happened. Then the watch began to glow. The ticking sound amplified, filling the room. Tick, tick, tick. The wailing of the core slowed down. It began to match the beat of the watch. The gyroscope stabilized. The blue light flared, turning a warm golden hue. "It is working!" Rook shouted. "The harmonics are syncing. The rift is sealing." A wave of relief washed over the group. Benny sat down hard on the floor and started laughing hysterically. "I am alive, I am alive, and I never told that soup vendor his broth was too salty. I have so much to live for." But Dr. Soren wasn't smiling. He was staring at the readouts. "Donald," Soren said quietly. Donald looked up. "What it is fixed right." "The rift is sealed for now," Soren said. But the Revel tide wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was a rejection. The canopy is rejecting the old artificial anchors. It wants a biological one, a permanent one. Soren turned the screen toward them. "The watch is just the key," Soren said. "The door is open. But for the city to survive the final wave, someone has to walk through it. Someone has to be the anchor." "What does that mean?" Callista asked, stepping forward, her hand pressing against her bandaged side. "It means," Soren said, looking at Donald with infinite sadness, "that when the big wave hits, the anchor has to filter the vibrational stress of the entire city through their own nervous system. They have to hold the memories, the pain, the panic of 5 million people. They have to hold it so the ground doesn't shake." "And if they let go?" Donald asked. "Then we fall," Soren said. "And the anchor usually doesn't survive the process. They're mind fragments." Silence descended on the room. Donald looked at the spinning core. He looked at the watch ticking away, doing its job. He turned and looked at Mason and Tessa. They were sitting with the rescued workers, sharing a nutrient bar. They were safe. They were laughing at something Benny said. Donald felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He had come here to hide, to retire, to be a boring dad who made bad pancakes and checked homework. He didn't want to be a hero. He didn't want to save the world. He just wanted to save his world, the 2 little people sitting on the floor. But he knew, with a terrible fatalistic certainty, that he couldn't have one without the other. If Polara fell, they fell. He clenched his jaw. "How long do I have?" Donald asked. "Donald, no," Callista said. Her voice was sharp, panicked. "How long until the final wave?" Donald repeated, looking at Soren. "Maybe 12 hours, Soren whispered. "Maybe less," Donald nodded. He walked over to the console and retrieved the watch. He strapped it back on. "We go back up," Donald said. "We get the people ready. We get the kids to the safest point." "You cannot do this," Callista said, grabbing his arm. "You heard him. It will destroy you. You are human. You are not built for this." Donald looked down at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, fear for him. "I am built to survive, remember," he said, trying to smile. It didn't quite reach his eyes. "And someone has to hold the door." He walked away toward the elevator. Callista stood there for a moment, the golden light of the core illuminating her face. She felt the phantom warmth of his hand on her chest. She caught up to him at the elevator doors. The others were loading in. She stood close to him, so close she could smell the smoke and sweat on his jacket. "If you do this," Callista said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was soft, vulnerable, and terrifyingly honest. "If you make yourself the anchor, I will not let you do it alone." Donald looked at her. "Callista." "No," she interrupted. "You have your team. You have me. You carry the city fine. But I will carry you." The elevator doors closed, sealing them in the darkness together, rising up toward the surface where the end of the world was waiting. The notification did not come with a siren. It did not come with a red strobe light or a screaming klaxon. It arrived on Donald's wrist interface with a polite, terrifyingly cheerful chime, the same sound the application made when a soup order was ready for pickup. Donald looked down at the holographic display of Lumen Lunch. The cheerful food icons were gone. In their place, pulsating with a stark white light against a black background, was a single line of text, "Final match active." Donald felt the floor beneath his boots drop by an inch. It was not a structural failure. It was a rhythmic skip. The entire city of Pollara, a floating jewel of gravity manipulation, had just missed a heartbeat. "It is starting," Dr. Soren whispered, his face draining of color until he looked like a sheet of paper. He was staring at the master console in the command center. The chorus canopy is desynchronizing. The harmonic weave is unraveling at the seams. Above them, the sky, usually a comforting tapestry of aurora-like energy, turned a bruised, sickly gray. The hum of the gravity generators, a sound so constant it was usually ignored, began to stutter. Thump, 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 silence, thump. "Report!" Callista barked. She was standing at the tactical table, her posture rigid, ignoring the fresh bandage around her waist. "The instability is spreading from the core outward," Rook yelled, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "Sectors 1 through 8 are holding, but the outer rim, the rim is vibrating at a frequency that shatters Durasteel." Warden Thane's face appeared on the main screen. He was safe in the upper spire, looking down at them like a god passing judgment. "Admiral," Thane said, his voice smooth and devoid of panic. "The logic is undeniable. We cannot stabilize the entire grid. I am initiating the severance protocol. We will maglock the blast doors to the outer rim sectors. We cut off the limb to save the body. The outer rim is where the refugees live," Donald said. His voice was low, rumbling through the room. "It is where the workers live. There are 200,000 people out there. And there are 5 million in the core," Thane countered coldly. "Do the math, human. I am closing the doors in 4 minutes. "No," Callista said. She didn't shout. She didn't ask. She simply stated it. She turned to the room. The fear was palpable. The technicians, the guards, the rescued workers, they were all looking at the screen, paralyzed by the scale of the disaster. "Listen to me," Callista's voice cut through the air. "Thane thinks this is a math problem. He thinks we are variables to be subtracted. But he forgets one thing. This city runs on rhythm, and panic is noise. If we let those people die, the scream of the rim will shatter the core anyway." She looked at Donald. "We don't close the doors. We open the veins. We circulate." She pulled up a holographic map of the city. "We are turning this evacuation into a symphony," Callista announced. "Donald, you are the anchor. You hold the center. I will conduct the flow." She pointed to Benny. "Benny, I need energy. Not batteries, food, water, sugar. You take the field kitchens. You set up aid stations at every major intersection. Panic burns calories. If they are hungry, they get angry. Feed them." Benny saluted, his otter-like ears twitching. "I will dispense comfort carbohydrates with extreme prejudice." "Admiral." "Rook," Callista continued. "Override the door controls. Keep them open. If Thane tries to lock them, burn the circuits." "With pleasure," Rook grinned, his cybernetic fingers twitching. "Dr. Soren," Callista said. "Monitor the harmonics. Tell us where the pressure is building, so we can move people before the floor breaks." "And the twins?" Donald asked. "Callista, looked at Mason and Tessa. They were standing by the console holding hands. They looked small, but their eyes were clear. "They are the metronome," Callista said. "They go to the central plaza in the safe zone. They keep the breathing steady. If the crowd panics, the twins bring them back to the rhythm." Donald nodded. He walked over to his children. He knelt down, ignoring the pain in his knees. The floor shuddered again, a violent jerk that knocked a datapad off a table. "Listen," Donald said, pulling them into a huddle. "This is going to get loud. It is going to get scary." "We know, Dad," Mason said. "I have to go into the core," Donald said. He didn't sugarcoat it. "I have to put on the headset and help the machine hold the sky up. I might not be able to talk to you for a while." Tessa reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were cool. "Are you scared, Dad?" Donald looked at them. He thought about lying. He thought about being the invincible father figure. But they had seen him bleed. They had seen him shake. "Yes," Donald said. "I am terrified." "But you are going to do it anyway," Tessa asked. "If I am scared, I still do it," Donald said. "That is the job. Fear is just a passenger. It doesn't get to drive." "We will breathe for you," Mason said fiercely. 1, 2, 3. We will breathe so loud you can hear it in the machine." Donald hugged them. It was a crushing, desperate hug. He smelled their shampoo, the dust of the tunnels, the scent of home. He imprinted it on his brain. "Go," he whispered. "Keep the rhythm." He watched them run off with Benny. Then he stood up and turned to the anchor interface. It was a chair that looked like a torture device, surrounded by a halo of neural uplinks. "Strap me in," Donald said to Callista. She moved efficiently, securing the restraints across his chest and arms. Her hands lingered on the buckles. "Donald," she said softly. "Don't say goodbye," Donald warned her. "Goodbye is for people who aren't coming back for dinner." "I was not going to say goodbye," Callista said. Her eyes were shimmering, not with tears, but with a fierce, violet intensity. "I was going to say, when this is over, you owe me a real date. No explosions, no gravity failures." "Deal," Donald said. "I know a place. Terrible soup, but great company." She slammed the neural helmet down over his head. The anchor. The moment the connection established, Donald didn't feel pain. He felt everything. It wasn't just sound. It was a tsunami of data. He felt the vibration of 5 million footsteps. He felt the structural groan of the titanium struts, holding the city together. He felt the terrified heartbeat of a child in Sector 4, and the adrenaline spike of a pilot in Sector 1. The canopy wasn't just an energy field. It was a memory bank. It stored the emotional resonance of the population to tune the gravity. And right now, the population was screaming. Flash. He was in a mine shaft on Sigma 9. The roof was collapsing. He couldn't breathe. Flash. He was in a hospital room. The heart monitor flatlined. His wife's hand went cold in his. Flash. He was falling. The city was falling. Donald gasped, his back arching off the chair. The influx of memory was drowning him. It wasn't just the city's fear. It was his own. The canopy was pulling his darkest moments to the surface, using his trauma as a lens to focus the energy. "Heart rate critical," Dr. Soren shouted. "He is rejecting the sync. The trauma load is too high." "Donald," Callista's voice came through the comms, but it sounded miles away underwater. Inside the simulation, Donald was curled into a ball in the dark. The weight was too much. He was just a man. He was just a miner. He couldn't hold a planet. "Let go," a voice whispered. "It is easier to fall." Then he felt a hand. It wasn't a physical hand. It was a presence, warm, firm. "Stay with me," Callista's voice cut through the dark. It wasn't a command. It was a tether. "Stay with them," Flash. He saw Mason and Tessa in the plaza. They weren't crying. They were standing on a crate. Mason was holding up 3 fingers. Tessa was inhaling, exaggerating the motion for a crowd of hundreds of terrified aliens. Inhale. Donald's lungs expanded in the real world. Exhale. The darkness receded. Donald planted his feet on the imaginary ground of the mindscape. He visualized the mine shaft. He visualized the falling rocks. And then, he visualized his hands catching the roof. He roared. It was a silent psychic scream that echoed through the canopy. He grabbed the chaotic threads of the Reveltide, the panic, the fear, the grief, and he didn't fight them. He accepted them. He braided them together. "I know you," he told the fear. "We are old friends. Sit down." The chaotic red lines on Dr. Soren's monitor snapped into a heavy, powerful gold. "He is holding it," Soren whispered, awestruck. "He is carrying the whole damn city." The battle for the rim outside the core. The physical battle was raging. Warden Thane had bypassed Rook's lockout. The blast doors to the outer rim were inching closed, grinding like the jaws of a giant beast. "They are sealing us in," a worker screamed. At the intersection of Sector 7, the panic was turning into a riot. People were crushing against the closing doors. "Make a hole!" Benny yelled. He wasn't driving a tank. He was driving a mobile food cart modified with a snowplow blade. "Emergency calories coming through." He rammed the cart into the mechanism of the blast door. Metal screeched. Sparks showered down. The door jammed, leaving a 3-foot gap. "Past the children," Benny shouted. "Assembly line, don't shove past them." High above on the observation deck, Callista watched the flow. It was working. The one-way corridors were keeping the stampede from forming. But the drones were coming back. Thane had deployed the automated suppression units. "Rook!" Callista yelled. "The drones!" "I can't stop them all!" Rook cried. "Thane has hard-line control." A drone swooped down toward the plaza, where the twins were leading the breathing exercise. It leveled a stun cannon at them. Mason didn't run. He looked at the drone. He kept counting. 1, 2. The crowd, seeing the human child's courage, stopped surging. They saw the drone. And for the first time in Pelleran history, they didn't wait for the authorities. A group of dock workers, huge, 4-armed beings, stepped in front of the twins. They formed a wall of flesh and muscle. "Not today," one of the workers growled. He picked up a piece of rubble and hurled it. It smashed the drone's sensor array. The crowd roared. It wasn't a roar of panic. It was a roar of defiance. "They are fighting back," Callista realized. "They aren't waiting to be saved. They are saving each other." She keyed into the citywide PA system. "This is Admiral Callista," she said. Her voice didn't waver. "The warden wants to close the doors because he thinks you are weak. He thinks you are just numbers. Show him he is wrong. Do not lock the doors before a breathing person. Hold the line." It happened spontaneously. Across the city, shopkeepers, teachers, and mechanics jammed chairs, vehicles, and their own bodies into the closing blast doors. They threw ropes across shattered bridges. They carried the wounded. The human trick, the ability to act before fear paralyzed you, had spread like a virus. A good virus. In the core, Donald was burning up. His body temperature was spiking to 104 degrees. The neural feedback was frying his synapses. He was holding the planet, but he was losing himself. The watch on his wrist, plugged into the console, was glowing so bright it was painful to look at. "He is fading," Soren yelled. "The anchor is slipping. We need more power. We need a stabilizer." Suddenly, the Lumen Lunch app on the main screen, which had been minimized, popped open. The notification changed from Final Match Active to Connecting to Source. "What is that?" Callista asked. "Why is the food app active?" "It isn't the app," Rook said, staring at the code. "The app was just a Trojan horse, a carrier signal. It is connecting to the canopy's deep storage. The Admiral C profile isn't you, Admiral." "What?" Callista frowned. "The 99% match," Rook said. "It is a biorhythm match. but not to a living person. A voice filled the room. It wasn't Callista's voice. It was a human voice. Warm, slightly grainy, like an old audio recording. Testing, testing. Is this thing on? Come on, you stupid piece of junk. Donald, deep in the trance, heard it. His heart stopped. Mom, he thought. The voice continued echoing through the core and out into the city speakers. This is Lieutenant Sarah. Rescue Vanguard Unit 4. We are pinned down in the debris field. Oxygen is low. I don't think I am making it back to the ship. Callista covered her mouth. The first anchors. She was one of them. My son, the voice said, cracking with emotion. He is back on Earth. He is so serious, always trying to fix things that are broken. Donald, if you ever hear this, I want you to know something. Donald's breathing hitched. The chaos in his mind stilled. He was a boy again, listening to a message he never got to hear. You don't have to be strong all the time, his mother's voice said. You just have to be kind. Strength breaks. Kindness stretches. The audio hissed, static interfering. Then, clear as a bell. We found a way to link the canopy. It responds to intent. It responds to connection. If you can say hi, you can pull someone back. Just say hi, Donnie. The random user, who had matched with him 99%, wasn't a person. It was an echo, a preserved resonance of his mother's heartbeat, and her final message stored in the canopy's black box, waiting for a biorhythm that matched hers, enough to unlock it. Donald's hi message at the beginning of the journey hadn't gone to a stranger. It had pinged the system. It had awakened his mother. Tears streamed down Donald's face under the helmet. He laughed, a broken, sobbing laugh. You are still bossing me around, he whispered, still making me be polite. He didn't fight the weight anymore. He didn't try to muscle it. He did what she said. He stretched. He sent a thought out into the web of the canopy. Not a command, a greeting. Hi, he thought to the frightened city. I am here. I have you. The canopy didn't just stabilize, it sang. The jagged, angry lines of the Revel tide smoothed out into a gentle, rolling hum. The gravity settled. The sky turned from gray to a brilliant, soft gold. The watch on the console stopped glowing. It just ticked. Tick, tick, tick. Donald slumped forward in the chair. Donald! Callista screamed, ripping the straps off. She pulled the helmet off. He was unconscious, bleeding from the nose, his skin burning hot. She pulled him onto the floor, cradling his head in her lap. Medic, get me a medic. Donald's eyes fluttered open. They were bloodshot, but they were his. Did we? He rasped. Did we catch it? Callista looked up. The readouts were all green. The city was floating steady. We caught it, she sobbed, smoothing his hair back. You caught it, you stubborn idiot. Donald smiled weakly. Mom says hi. Then he passed out. The family table, 6 weeks later. The sign above the door was hand-painted, slightly crooked. Donald Co. Interspecies Rescue Repair. We fix anything. If we can't fix it, we feed it. The shop was located in the converted warehouse in Sector 4. It was part garage, part community center, part mess hall. Donald stood at the workbench, tightening a bolt on a prosthetic leg for a retired miner. He moved a little slower now, and there were streaks of gray in his hair that hadn't been there before, but his hands were steady. Dad, Tessa yelled from the kitchen area. Benny is trying to reinvent pizza again. He is putting glowing moss on it. It is bioluminescent basil, Benny shouted back. It adds ambiance to the digestion process. Donald wiped his hands on a rag and walked over. The space was full. Not just with customers, but with neighbors. The walls were covered in drawings from local kids. The door chime rang. It wasn't the harsh buzzer of the old days. It was a real bell. Admiral Callista walked in. She wasn't wearing her uniform. She was wearing a soft civilian tunic and trousers, though she still wore her combat boots. Old habits died hard. She looked at Donald. The tension that used to define her jawline was gone. She looked happy. "I hear there is a pizza experiment happening," she said, leaning against the counter. "It is a biohazard," Donald warned her, smiling. "Enter at your own risk." "I have survived worse," she said. She reached out and took his hand. Her thumb brushed over the old watch on his wrist. "How is the rhythm today?" "Steady," Donald said. 100%. Mason ran past, chasing a drone he had reprogrammed to blow bubbles. He stopped and hugged Callista's leg. "Hey, Cal, are you staying for dinner?" Callista looked down at the boy, then up at Donald. She looked at the chaotic, noisy warm shop. She looked at the found family that had formed in the cracks of a broken world. "I think I am," Callista said. "My shift ended an hour ago, and I don't have anywhere else to be." Donald squeezed her hand. "Welcome home, Admiral." He looked down at his wrist interface. He hadn't uninstalled Lumen Lunch. He opened it just out of habit. The screen flashed. Match found. Target family table. Compatibility 100%. Donald laughed. He closed the app. He didn't need the algorithm anymore. He walked to the table, pulled out a chair for Callista, and sat down to eat the glowing pizza with the people who had taught a planet how to breathe.